Mort Sahl is a Canadian-born satirist who became a sort of youth leader, a sort of Pied Piper of intellectual youth out in San Francisco. And his followers formed almost a cult. He's been called cynical by unfriendly critics, but Sahl is actually too knowledgeable to be a cynic. He believes in healthy skepticism. He's a kind of anomaly, basically a critic of life and society, and yet he's won a considerable following as an entertainer, about the first man of our generation to build this particular bridge. Mort, are you still agreeing with me?
Well, I can redefine some of that. First of all, a cynic is someone who is inexperienced generally, whereas someone who is embittered, to clear up the semantics here, is experienced. You have a right to be embittered. In America, it's supposed to be critical when people say to you, you're bitter. Sometimes people have a right to be bitter. They're embittered because they want to change things. It's not resignation to be embittered. Just as Freud once defined depression medically as it's partially rage. It's not just melancholy, but sadness and rage. So there's a connotation of knowledgeability there, getting at the sources, hopefully.
Well, is there a continuing situation that you can feel bitter about, or are there new things?
Yeah, well, this society shows no signs of a utopia. There are a great many things that bear attacking. I think that the best thing anybody can do for this country is, this country really needs a critic. I was once talking to a girl who belonged to the Democratic Party in Massachusetts, and she was critical of one of the candidates, and she said to me, he really isn't fit, in my view. I said, what are you going to do when you're called upon to vote? She said, well, I'm a good party girl. I'm going to vote for him. And it occurred to me that maybe the best thing she could do for her party was not to vote for him. Maybe the best thing you can do for your party is to criticize. You know, the old term, His Majesty's loyal opposition. I think this country needs a critic in order to survive, as a matter of fact. It needs more than one, but so far it has one. You need somebody on the attack who audits what we do. We've had enough of the gung-ho, you know, those people who will urge you to jump into the ravine. So there's no imminent danger that everything's going to be great and there won't be anything to talk about. Even from those who claim they're the most zealous patriots, the ones who fly those flags on their antennas. Based on the outcome of the new election, I'm going to fly my flag upside down depending on who wins. But the signal of distress, of course, internationally recognized. But I don't see... they don't know what the purpose of the country is. Zealous people? No, we don't need any super patriots. It's enough just to pay your taxes and take care of your mother.
Do you like these Rorschach test word games? Suppose someone said Time Magazine.
Time Magazine used to be blamed by the intellectuals as if it was, the number one social ill. I hardly think it is. We have other problems. Time only reports the news as they see it. They're only as good as the news is, and let me put it that way.
Did you feel particularly honored when you wound up on the cover and as the subject of the cover story?
Yeah, sure. It was the second largest selling issue in their history. A lot of people saw it, and it's interesting because they accept you on your own terms. It's mass acceptance on your own terms. That's kind of hard to come by. You spend your life doing that usually. So it came to me early, and I got a chance to talk, and people got a chance to talk about me, and they weren't too critical. They were very generous. Most of the people they consulted in the magazine.
Well, you came along so far as most people hearing you and seeing you for the first time is concerned. At a time when there wasn't very much outspeaking going on.
No, that was during, that's true, that was in 1953, and Senator McCarthy was in the saddle, and there wasn't much. There is a great bluntness in this country, whether you chart it by the dropouts in school, by the youth, or whether you find people talking in terms of, well, there aren't any candidates. There's a bluntness. Nobody knows what this country is about. If you really want to stop conversation at a party, just try this. Ask people what the purpose of America is, and you can't get an answer. When a country has a purpose, then people have a purpose, and you must define purpose in your life, or it's insanity. You're just killing time. That's what most of them are doing. It doesn't have, generally, in a capitalistic society, people buy time nowadays. Time to live. And what they're doing is, it's an excessive cost. It means armament in a Cold War. It means disarmament. It means no purpose. And I think we need someone to speak out It's not enough to say, people come up to me at parties and say, there aren't any candidates. They vote by default. Well, then you have to ask why. Everything they say, I just ask why. I don't care whether they agree with me or not. I just want to know why they're not more resolute, even in their prejudice. Because Americans used to be, or else they misrepresented themselves.
Well, then you would tend to feel that Malcolm X is a good example of, or even a bad example, but a strong example of what you're speaking of, or George Lincoln Rockwell.
Well, those guys are ridiculous. Lincoln. I mean, they're both. Unless it's dementia, it's opportunism. They're working within a capitalistic system, and they're making a buck, and they're grinding an axe. But they're not. They're ineffective. They're ineffective on the part of minority groups, especially Malcolm X, who's ostensibly working for a minority. The Negro leadership in this country is fractionated anyway, and that's why the Negroes have not done better. They haven't accomplished their ends. And if I had one criticism of them, it would be that they're not effective. I'm in sympathy with everything they want to do, but they're not doing it very well. In fact, they're not doing it at all. And they try to do it by threatening order. They do it by anarchic means. And the last thing America needs now is anarchy. We have chaos of our own. We don't need to import any from other groups.
All right, let's run down a list of words to set you off, Mort, may I? Divorce lawyers.
Well, that's a girl's best friend. That's better than her father. If her father was a divorce attorney, she'd have it made. She wouldn't have to get married at all. I mean, it would just be, an interim measure. That's terrible, Divorce is an industry. In the Western world, monogamy is crumbling, and there's a very feeble defense given by people. Something to the order of, they haven't come up with anything better. It isn't better, but they've come up with something. It's damaging. They've come up with a certain kind of promiscuity, which is not satisfying at all to people, but for the moment, it distracts them. It's not a diversion, it's a distraction. And so monogamy is crumbling, though. Boy, living together or being married isn't making it. And I don't know what's happening with people, but there's nobody pursuing that point except a few social workers.
Do you know any alternatives?
What, to marriage?
To marriage, to promiscuity, to what there is.
Well, yeah, order is always an alternative to what there is. There isn't any order. Don't forget, I'm not crying out in pain. The people who are being abandoned are crying out in pain. Women don't like to be abandoned, and men don't like to be accused of a bad performance. But that's what's happening to them. And, we're all running around, as it were, with a coat of wet paint on us, and we brush up against each other. And we leave marks on each other. And you take away a person's youth, and you marry them, and you promise them something, at least in their eyes, and then you don't deliver. So it's not much fun. People obviously want to, they want their lives to have meaning, and they hang their hopes around the neck of various individuals, and it isn't working. It obviously isn't working. I'm not thinking about amending any laws or anything, but you must remember that the family unit has great value, because organized religion, which gets the credit in the world for bringing us order and helping us survive, religion historically only came out of reflecting the family unit. A family unit brought us civility and kept us from killing one another. And then the churches and the temples reflected that order. But the order of beings and the roles we played came from the family.
How much good do you think you did? When I say did, I don't mean that your doing is past, but did since you began in 1953 up to a few seconds ago. I wonder if you've ever appraised it.
Yeah, I shook up a few people. The last year I just spent kind of hanging around listening socially to see what the currents are, and I don't hear anything. I don't hear anybody working and who says anything. So I reckon I stand alone because I really care about this. I kid about it a lot, but I care about it, obviously. And I notice that people accept. I wonder how much they're going to accept before they start screaming. It doesn't matter who's nominated and what corruption is uncovered. They just go right along with it, right into that ravine. My job is just to point out that there is insanity. Their job is to do something about it if they want to survive. From a psychological standpoint, I'm not sure that everyone wants to survive. It's like a survival manual for the Army. The first question should be, do you want to survive? Then if you answer yes, then they should tell you how to live off the land if your plane crashes.
Well, do you feel that that America is alone in these respects?
Well, there's an international insanity. I think our generation, in general, it isn't just in this country. The only thing is I live here, therefore it is crucial. The rest of the world will take care of itself. A great deal of it patterns itself after us. We're a model to others. So it's crucial as to what we do, because they think what we do is the manual. You must follow it. And the cultural breezes do blow from west to east. Therefore, we have a responsibility to give the best we can. And this country has great advantages. Therefore, it's a shame if they're not taken advantage of. It's not a matter of us just being alone. It's, for instance, we have the only form of government that can have violent change without violent overthrow. And the Founding Fathers set all that up. This whole generation, though, has a great anonymity about it, and therefore resorts to, not just in this country, all over the world, that's why they resort to promiscuity and sexuality, because I have a notion that it is probably the only way they can find any identity, because all else fails them. It's not enough to have slogans. They're not even brand names. USA is a brand name, and it stands for something.
Well, Mort, reciting what is good does not cancel out what is bad, and I don't intend to, I don't hope for you to be able to do that. But it's possible for a listener overseas to feel that you believe that nothing is good here because of the things that you have said are not good. What is good about America and the way America does and the way it is imitated?
What is good about America? First of all, I'm not taking an examination on what is good about America. And if a doctor came in and took your temperature and told you you were ill and was absolutely honest with you, you wouldn't then turn to him and say, what about the parts of my body that are good? That's ridiculous. America had a national character which is suffering from a degree of erosion through disuse. Now, that's my point. Now, I could make it funnier, but that would not cover up the point. What is, and it is up to someone to say it. And if they disagree, then maybe they will have the energy, they'll summon the energy to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, there's some good things too. I'm not in the areas of making foreign policy. That's why I never became, I'm not interested in politics at all. I'm interested in the theater, and the theater talking for our time. It should be implicit on the voice of America that the fact that I can exist in America and do what I do is a measure of what can take place in this country. But I'm not one for getting on the air and doing what people do on the Voice of America. And those people who come on and say, I'm half Chinese and half Jewish, and only in America could I become a television actor. I'm not in favor of that. The big thing is to join the human race, to take your gifts, whatever your parents left you in your genes, and to animate them into a human being, hopefully, if you get lucky.
Mort, you have said that there's a big difference, that you are able to ignore facts in order to get at the truth. What is the difference between facts and the truth?
Oh, well, then there's sometimes things are true, but they're not actual, and you embellish. That's what theater is. You relate something fictionally, but it's the truth. It's a long-range truth, but it's not a current actuality. See, you invent your fairy tale. As long, it's like Aesop's fables.
Mort Sahl. Thank you, Mort.
Hear, hear.